Welcome back. Russia celebrated the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II, and President Vladimir Putin presided over a massive parade of tanks, missiles and troops through Red Square and welcomed over 24 world leaders, the most since Moscow sent troops into Ukraine. Putin suggested a 3-day ceasefire between May the 8th and May the 10th, but accused Ukraine of what it called terrorist activities. For more on this, we are now joined by SABC News correspondent Dasha Chernyshova, and she joins us now via our video link. Dasha, thank you so much for your time this evening. Perhaps let's start off here. As Russia celebrates 80 years since its defeat of the German Nazi, what has been the mood in Moscow in particular?
Well, general festivities are indeed underway, and it is a very important holiday for millions of Russians who all hold dear the memories of their ancestors, and every family has been somehow impacted by this great patriotic war. 26 million people, that's the number every child is taught at an elementary school. That's the number that the Soviet Union lost and sacrificed to win this victory. But also what we have seen, especially this year, is an exceptionally tight security. There's been no internet connectivity throughout Moscow in the first half of the day when the military parade was on, and as the international leaders were laying flowers and holding meetings at the Kremlin with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. But just imagine, there are more than 20 international leaders attending those events, and obviously Moscow really needed for these choreographed events to go smoothly, and therefore they have taken unprecedented security measures, especially because in the run-up to this day we have seen intensification of the Ukrainian drone attacks against Russian regions as well as Moscow.
And Dasha, touching on the 29 world leaders who have descended upon Russia, one would ask, what do you make of their presence, particularly at a time where Russia is at war with Ukraine?
Well, first of all, the Kremlin has thanked those international leaders for still attending those festive events, saying that they came despite the heavy international pressure, especially when it comes to the European leaders, President of Serbia, Alexander Vucic, as well as the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico. They still managed to get to the Russian capital. We also have seen the Russian president holding bilateral talks with many of those leaders, and those leaders themselves holding bilateral meetings with one another. The Kremlin's message here is very clear. There were attempts by the West to isolate Moscow, but those attempts have failed. But also we understand that this is the opportunity to forge new alliances and for Russia to make sure that its standing internationally is strong. And Moscow has been saying that its ideas apparently are being shared by other countries.
And Dasha, I mean, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, saying that Russians are in support of this war with Ukraine. Is this the sentiments you are getting from Russians on the ground?
Well, if you ask the average Russian family whether they do support or not, they would definitely say they support the end to the so-called special military operation, but on Russia's terms. And that would be the prevalent answer you would get here in Moscow. Keep in mind that the Russian authorities have been trying to tie together the events of the past with the events of the present, because Moscow has been fighting against Nazi Germany in the 40s, and now the Russian authorities said that they are fighting to denazify Ukraine. So there is this link that the authorities are trying to draw between these two military campaigns. But obviously for most Russians there is this special meaning in their hearts when it comes to World War II, and perhaps this is something that they really cherish, and therefore they go outside, they go attend and lay flowers, and they do celebrate that victory in particular, at least for the time being.
And when it comes to North Korea, Dasha, I mean, it got invited, and they've sent an even bigger delegation from the last time. What do we make of the presence of a large delegation from North Korea?
Well, the North Korean delegation was not only present in Moscow's Red Square, there were also soldiers from North Korea who marched in this parade alongside with the Russian troops, the Chinese troops and the troops from other countries who took part in this major parade. The Russian president, after the parade, has shaken hands with those North Korean soldiers. We also know that there were some of the commanders that helped Russia liberate Russia's Kursk region after the Ukrainian incursion. And the Kremlin has most recently confirmed indeed that the North Korean soldiers were playing a crucial part in this effort. That does go to show the strengthening relationship between Moscow and Pyongyang, as well as the attempts of Moscow to send a message to the world that Russia has other alliances and other allies that are ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with Russia.
And just a bit earlier on in the year, Dasha, we know that the US imposed a number of tariffs throughout many countries in the world. And one of those countries was indeed China, and they were present today at those celebrations. What do we make about China's appearance at these celebrations, particularly at a time where they don't see eye to eye with the US when it comes to the tariffs?
Well, obviously, the attendance of Chinese President Xi Jinping is a very important event for Russia. He not only attended the events for this parade, but also made an official visit to Russia. And there were numerous documents signed after hours of negotiations between Russia and China in Moscow. We understand that Russian President Vladimir Putin will be paying a visit to China later this year in September, and this meeting comes at a time indeed when Russia is holding the so-called rapprochement with the United States, trying to normalize the relationship, but also as indeed tariffs have been discussed to be imposed against China by the United States. And in this situation, if you talk to the economists, they all point to the short-term benefit that Russia could see, because China will be seeking to reorient its trade flows even further, and Russia has been reorienting its trade flows already, trading more with Beijing. So in the short term, they all say that Russia can actually benefit from more cooperation with China, or at least when it comes to trade. But one way or another, we understand that the quantity and the quality of trade is something that matters, and therefore there are numerous intergovernmental commissions that are being held between Moscow and Beijing to improve and further develop their bilateral relationship, including in trade and investment.
All right, Dasha, thank you so much for your time. That's SABC News correspondent Dasha Chernyshova just giving us the latest update when it comes to those celebrations taking place in Russia, celebrating 80 years since its defeat of Nazi Germany.